Second here.
What happened to Owen?
It looks like it's on YouTube, but it's still in a practice session.
I'm not sure what happened to Owen. Do we start the webinar and just keep going, Joanne?
I can check on YouTube that it's on. Give me 1 second and I'll see if I can see that.
Oh, here's Owen. What's happening, Owen? You're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Owen.
Owen, you're muted.
Be able to. Owen, just so you know, it is on YouTube. There you go. Now you got it. I think we're good now,
Well,
Greg.
All right. Owen, you're muted. Are we good to go? Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Finance and Claims Committee of the Norwalk Common Council for today, Thursday, September 7th, 2023, beginning at 6:04 p.m. We'll start with the roll call of the Common Council Finance and Claims Committee members. Councilmember Lenora Najelski-Eichner.
Present.
Councilmember Jen McMurr is
Here.
present. Thank you. Councilmember Ed Camacho
I'm here.
is present. Thank you. Councilmember Diana Revolus.
Present.
Councilmember Brian Meek.
Here.
And thank you. And Councilmember John Kides.
Here.
Thank and myself is present, Greg Burnett. So we have a quorum. Thank you. Moving on to item 3 in the agenda is public participation. We did not have any comments submitted in prior to the meeting, and I do not see anyone as an attendee waiting to join and speak during public participation. So at this time, I will close public participation and move on to item 4 in the agenda. Item 4 is to recommend and refer to the Common Council a special capital appropriation in the amount of $2,900,000 for the Norwalk Public Schools for the acquisition of 6 properties abutting the proposed South Norwalk School and other project-related purposes. The actual resolution that we'll be voting on reads as follows. Item 4A, authorize the allocation of $2,900,000 in special capital appropriation funds in the Norwalk Public Schools for the acquisition of 6 properties abutting the proposed South Norwalk School as identified here in this memo. This capital appropriation shall be funded through $2,900,000 of authorized but unissued general obligation bonds or notes of the city. The $2,900,000 of bonds or notes of the city shall be issued in accordance with the provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions that authorize the issuance of the bonds or notes of the city for project account number as noted. And also item 4B, approve the deauthorization in the amount of $2,900,000 from free balance in the Jefferson School Improvement Project capital budget account as noted. Do we have a motion on these two items?
Motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Diana Revelous. And we're ready for discussion. And we have with us Darren Callahan, our legal counsel, to lead the discussion on this item.
Sure, great. Thank you, Councilmember Burnett. I think members of this committee are well aware that the city is mid-process, mid-public approval process for approving the acquisition of properties that essentially abut and surround One Meadow Street Extension, which will be the future home of the South Norwalk Elementary School, which is slated to begin construction, I believe, sometime next year. The properties specifically are 28, 32, 36, 38 Oxford Street, 16 Meadow Street Extension, in the spur line, a portion of the spur line that's located in where it abuts the One Meadow Street Extension property on the east side, and butts in between where it butts the property and South Main Street on the east side of the One Meadow Street Extension property. As a result of the pending approvals for those acquisitions, it's necessary to have in place sufficient funds. Hopefully those acquisitions will go forward as arm's length third-party voluntary transactions. But there's always a possibility that they'd have to be by way of condemnation. And as a result, we do need to have funds available should that we need to commence a condemnation action, because we would be required to deposit the average of our appraised values for the property, the subject property, with the court. So the $2.9 million, again, is money that is left over from the Norwalk School construction project that was previously approved. It's essentially, the request is to take from that line item or deauthorize that line item and transfer it to a new line item for the purposes of funding these acquisitions. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I might just note that this item has gone through review through the Common Council Land Use and Building Management Committee, as well as was reviewed and approved yesterday to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I believe it's also gone through the BET. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any questions or
Yeah.
further question?
I
Councilmember Ed Camacho.
I do have a question, and I'm sorry, I may not have been paying attention, and I apologize for that. But did you also talk about item B, the deauthorization of the 2.9 million, and what that's?
Maybe not as in the level of detail that it should have. So the deauthorization is simply necessary to offset the authorization for the purposes of the acquisition. So currently it's in an account for the Jefferson School improvements, and it was authorized specifically only for that purpose by the BET in a prior fiscal budget period, probably a number of years ago now. At this point, it's considered a free balance because the school project has been closed out and it's essentially leftover money. So the request is to deauthorize that free balance. In other words, transfer it so it can no longer be used for that purpose and transfer it into a new account for the specific purpose of acquiring these surrounding properties.
Gotcha.
Are there any other further questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Brian Meek.
Thanks. Probably a question for Henry or his team, but do we already have this money bonded or how does the interest rate play? Are we using the same interest rates from the Jefferson loan in place of this? How does that work?
Please recall that we don't borrow money based on approved capital projects. We base money on cash flow forecasts because of the IRS requirements that when we borrow money for tax-free for governmental purposes, there are certain spend down requirements where we must spend those funds within a certain required timeline, usually 2 to 4 years. So what we do now is every quarter, the controller goes out to all of the department heads and chiefs who control capital projects. And we ask them for a rolling 2-year forecast, quarter by quarter. So 8 quarters forward. What are your cash flow expectations for the capital projects, both expenditures and any reimbursements? We often get state grants to offset capital projects. And the finance department uses those projections to determine how much we should borrow. We tend to borrow every summer, often in August. So the Jefferson School had a budget which was not totally utilized. As properly described, the budget was available. It was already approved. And this resolution is repurposing that budget from that school to the South Norwalk School. Regarding the actual borrowing of funds, I would assume that in the rolling forecast of cash flow, we will see these funds pop up, and then we will use our borrowing capacity to offset it. Obviously, even at year end, because it's a forecast, a cash flow forecast, we often have funds at the end of the year available for the expenditures. And then we supplement them as we just did in August for an additional 70 million. So from a cash point of view, we have the cash. And if it hasn't already been forecast, then it probably would be in next year's forecast and we borrow then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing or seeing none. Councilmember Nora Nadelski-Eichner.
Very briefly to that point, what is the timeline that we're currently anticipating for this acquisition? I know that it's not necessary to have these properties to complete the school, but I'm just wondering where it falls in the overall timeline of this project.
So that's a great question. And the answer is somewhat dependent on how the interactions go with the various property owners. So the goal is to acquire the properties voluntarily, and the goal is to acquire those properties voluntarily quickly. There are a few things that are out of our control, which would be negotiating a purchase and sale agreement, accessing the properties to conduct due diligence, anything from survey work to environmental analysis. And there might be some other issues that crop up regarding how to address tenancy issues. But as for an outside date, the way the eminent domain statute works is that there is 6 months from the date of final approval by the Common Council to commence an eminent domain action. So one way or the other, 6 months from September 13th is probably a good outside date for acquisition.
And just to quickly follow up on that, then, Henry, we're comfortable that even if we need to put this money on deposit within the next 6 months, you have more than enough through the current bonding to be able to do so.
Yes, we have enough unexpended bond proceeds that if we had to shift and put a deposit down even before next year's financing, we're fine.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing and Councilmember Diana Revolus.
Thank you. This is probably a question. I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. I just don't think it'll be able to be answered right now. I'm just, in particularly with the issue of like residents in this, do we happen to know or have an amount or of how many homes or residents will be displaced and what would be the incentives to help them? That might not be even in our foreset right now. This is not even a conversation, even in finance. I'm just wondering, is there a number or an understanding of how much that may have to be incurred in cost in that as well?
It's a good question. And the answer is we have limited information on it. We do know that at least 2 of the properties are multifamily dwellings and have multiple tenants. You know, in this instance, the Relocation Act would apply. We would apply the Relocation Act. And we have a relocation officer that's works out of the health department. Usually you see relocations because of effectively when properties are condemned for health and safety reasons. And that's why it's staffed out of the person staffed out of the health department. But as far as the overall cost, very, very difficult to estimate what that would be. It depends on a lot of factors that are really just out of our control at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I thought, like I said, I'm sure it may not be unanswered, but just wondering if we had a purview of kinda. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's an issue we continue to analyze.
I appreciate it.
Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of the resolution, item 4A and B as presented, please show by a raise of hand or verbal aye. Aye. Although, thank you. All those opposed have the same right. I see one, Councilmember Brian Meek. Any abstentions? I see none, so the motion passed with 6 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you. This item will now move to the full Common Council for review and approval for Tuesday, September 12th, council meeting. Moving on to item 5, which is to review the proposed amendment to the description of available capital budget funds for the Bell Library Expansion Project and refer the following resolution to the Common Council for action. And the resolution that we will be discussing on reads as follows. Item 5A, authorize to revise the project description for capital budget account number as noted, current funding for building programming phase with design funding for building programming phase with design options and property acquisition. This project was approved ending 2020 with a budget of $450,000, no actuals to date. Also, item 5B, which reads as follows: authorize to revise the project description for capital budget account as noted, current Belden Avenue Library expansion, architectural services, proposed Belden Avenue Library expansion, architectural services and property acquisition. This project was approved in fiscal year ending 2021 with a budget of $1,570,000, no actuals to date. Do we have a move on this resolution?
Motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Diana Revelous. And we also have Aaron Callahan, our legal counsel, to provide narrative to this item.
Great, thank you, Councilman. You know, and again, of course, these things would have been presented by Mr. Lowe, but he's on vacation, so I'm doing my best to fill in his big shoes. This is a previously approved item of appropriation of funds in two amounts, 450 and 1.75 million. The initial scope of use of those funds were for architectural services, and the purpose of the resolution is to expand the scope of the uses of those funds to include property acquisition. As you know, in addition to the 6 property adjacent to One Meadow Street Extension, the city is also in mid-public approval process to approve the acquisition of a portion of 11 Belden, being the same geographical footprint as the property that we were leasing for additional parking facilities for the Norwalk Public Library. So again, this is just an expansion of the scope of the previous funding line item for these funds.
Thank you, Attorney Callahan. Do we have, and again, this item did go through review of the Land Use Building Management Committee, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the BET previous to this meeting. Have any questions or comments as it relates to this resolution? Okay, yes, Councilmember Brian Meek.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't understand the expediency of this. Isn't there, we're gonna put all this money into a library that could end up being overshadowed by some ugly hotel next to it if the city loses its other interests over there. I mean, what is the expediency of pushing this forward right now? Thanks.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm necessarily qualified to answer that question. It's my understanding that that staff have identified with the assistance of the library that this acquisition of this property was critical and time sensitive in nature. And that's probably the depth of my understanding of the timing issue.
I'll take a shot if I can. My understanding is that Alan Lowe has to get authorization so he can move forward with the acquisition of the 6 properties. And he needs a certain dollar amount of the acquisition. And so the previously approved authorization for the library is going to be repurposed so that they can acquire the properties for the school, and that the library will come back next year in the capital budget and get replacement for this authorization that's being used now. It's not to authorize acquisition for the library at this time, to the best of my understanding.
Okay, that's much less muddy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other comments or questions at this point on this resolution? Okay, hearing, seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of this resolution 5A and 5B, show by a verbal aye or raise of hand. Okay, and those opposed have the same right. We have one opposed, Councilmember Brian Meek. Any abstentions? I see the motion pass with 6 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you. And this item will also move to the full council for review and approval at the Tuesday, September 12th Common Council meeting. The final item on the special agenda is item 6, which is to recommend a special capital appropriation amount of $2 million by the Building and Facilities Department for the following improvements at the new South Norwalk School, formerly the Hatch and Bailey site, at the intersection of South Main Street, Meadow Street, and Wilson Avenue. And the resolution reads that we will be reviewing and voting on reads as follows. 6A, authorize the allocation of $2 million in special capital appropriation to the Building and Facilities Department for the following improvements at the new South Norwalk School, formerly the Hatch and Bailey site, at the intersection of South Main Street, Meadow Street, Wilson Avenue. A, $1 million for intersection traffic improvements to be allocated to TM&P. B, $1 million for intersection flood improvement to be allocated to DPW, account number noted, traffic improvements, Norwalk Neighborhood School. This capital appropriation shall be funded through $2 million of authorized but unissued general obligation bonds or notes of the city. The $2 million of bonds or notes of the issued in accordance with provisions and terms set forth in the original bond resolutions that authorize the issuance of bonds or notes of the city for project account number as noted, Norwalk Neighborhood Schools. Item B, approve the deauthorization of $1 million from free in the Ponus Ridge School Improvement Project, capital budget account number as noted. And C, approve the deauthorization of $1 million from free budget in the Jefferson School Improvement Project, capital budget account number as noted. Do we have a motion on this resolution?
Motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Delus makes the motion. And again, this item has gone through review with the Land Use and Building Management, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the BET. And Darren or Joanne, I don't know who's leading the commentary on this item.
Sure, I'll start off, and if Joanne wants to chime in at any point, please feel free to do so. So this is very similar to the first resolution that we discussed. Effectively, what's happening here is there's a balance left over. In this case, the construction project was Ponus Ridge School Construction and Jefferson School Construction. Each have a balance of appropriated funds in the amount of $1 million left over at the time of project closeout. Those amounts are essentially being transferred from those accounts into a new account, which will allow the funds to be used for half of the funds will be used for DPW to do intersection flood improvements at the intersection of South Main, Meadow Street, and Wilson Avenue. And the other $1 million will go to TMP to advance the design work of the road realignment at a minimum, and probably road expansion project along South Main Street to the point where it connects to that intersection, South Main, Meadow, and Wilson Avenue. Now, Joan, just correct me where I might be wrong on that.
No, that is exactly it. Yes. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Nora Najolski Eichner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Darren, just to clarify, I don't
Nora,
Mostly inaudible.
Yeah,
we also were allocating
Nora, we can't quite understand you.
for sidewalks, which I believe would go under DP. Yeah, I thought that might be a problem. I will type.
Nora, could you maybe turn off your video and restate your question? Because we didn't hear the first part of it.
Let
There
me,
we go.
yes, does that work? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes,
Yes.
much better.
Okay, my apologies. So my recollection is that we also were doing new sidewalks in the vicinity of the school, which would obviously fall under DPW. Was that a different line allocation that we previously approved? Or is this allocation for flood work also including that sidewalk work? Just want to make sure we don't lose sight of that portion of the plan.
Yeah, so I do know that the intent is to do full right-of-way improvements, which would include the road and the sidewalks. It would also include an access sidewalk from the sidewalk along South Main Street directly into and over effectively what is the spur line right now, but allowing access at probably about the midpoint of One Meadow Street extension directly to the school. So yes, sidewalks are included, including ones that are directly adjacent to South Main Street, and also a sidewalk that would connect that adjacent sidewalk into the school property. Joanne, is that correct?
Yes, I want to just add one thing. It is my understanding that they've already been allocated monies to improve the sidewalks on the other side, not on the spur line side. So that maybe is what Councilwoman Nora is speaking of, because that is already there. But this would be in addition to that as well, to work on the sidewalks as well on the other side, on the spur line side, so that there's a better right of way and drop off area for students to be able to walk.
Okay, thanks. Very helpful. Thank you. And I guess my question is, I thought sidewalks were typically under DPW's purview. In this instance, the sidewalks will be under TMP's purview.
Yes.
In this instance, yes.
Yes, in this instance, yes, because it's going to go along with the reconfiguration of any stop signs in corners having to do with the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure the funding was in the right place.
Would so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments relating to this resolution? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of this resolution, 6A, B, and C, show by a raise of hand or verbal aye. All those opposed have the same right. Any abstentions? Councilmember Meeks, is that an vote no or
Sorry.
abstention?
Sorry, Lassa passed me. That's a no vote. Thanks.
Okay, so we have 6 in favor of this motion, 1 opposed, so the motion passed, and this resolution will move to the full Common Council on Tuesday, September 12th for review and approval. With that, we move for adjournment. Do we have a
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I don't see any opposed or any abstentions. The motion passed. Thank you for your time and participation, and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
You all.
Goodbye.